Hey guys, thanks for tuning into the My Career Path podcast. Today I have a special guest, Dallas Klinger. He is the CEO at Power County Hospital District in southeastern Idaho. After choosing accounting as his career, he actually kind of fell into the CEO role at the hospital. I hope you guys enjoy his work experiences and what he's done to kind of reach the point he is today. So let's get into it. All right, everybody, I'm super excited to talk with Dallas Klinger here. He's actually a guy who just did something crazy with my dad. Him and a couple of his buddies decided to ride all the way from California to Florida in what was it, about 50 hours?
Well, we actually did it in 46 and a half.
That's right, on a motorcycle, no less. So first day, 21 hours, but man, this guy's got some stories to tell. So I'm excited to have him. I'd love to just hear about you and kind of your biggest achievements in life. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you've done.
I just have lived a pretty normal life. It's kind of been ho-hum, but I'm married, have 5 children, 13 grandchildren, served a mission for our church, went to Argentina back in the 1970s and lived through a South America military coup, actually. They threw Isabel Perón out of office and put in a military government while I was there. So it was a little bit touch and go for a while.
Not sure what's going on. We're just going to keep trying to do what we can, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Of course, after I came back, I got married. We have had 5 children. I worked for a large accounting firm when I first came out of college. I did my college degree. I got an associate's degree at Ricks College back before it was BYU Idaho. Mm-hmm. And then I transferred to Idaho State University, got an accounting degree, bachelor's degree in accounting information systems, and went to work for Pete Marwick, who was an international accounting firm at the time. I moved to Texas. We lived 3 years down there. Came back to Idaho to work for a local firm in Pocatello and worked for them for 3 or 4 years. Don't remember exactly how long. And then opened my own firm and had a small accounting firm here in American Falls for about 8 or 10 years. And then went to work for the hospital. The hospital administrator at the time was in our Rotary Club, and so I got to know him there. And he said that his CFO had taken a different job, and he asked me if I could do monthly financial statements for his board to keep them informed until he had somebody hired. And every time he'd come by to pick up a monthly financial statement, he would up that offer a little bit. Finally, it was good enough for me to, between the money and the benefits and, a few things like that, it was good enough for me to take the job. And so I did. Interesting story. He resigned his position 2 weeks later, and our hospital board interviewed 3 or 4 people for the job. And then they came to me and said, "We don't like who we have interviewed and think you can do the job. Are you interested?" And I said, "Well, I'm really green. I'm not sure if I know enough about the way hospitals run yet." And they said, "Well, we think you can learn." And so they hired me. So I was a CFO for 3 months and then stepped into the CEO position.
That's awesome.
It's not many people make that kind of a step into a CEO position. And that was almost 17 years ago. So it's been, and it's been fun. I have absolutely loved my job here. I love the community. I love the fact that our hospital helps people in the community. The people that I have working here with me, my coworkers here at the hospital, are just awesome. And it has made all the difference in the world for me on how much joy and satisfaction that I have just being able to work with the people I do, work with the community, do the job that I do. And honestly, even after 17 years here, I am still learning.
Well, and I think that's interesting that you bring that up, because in a hospital, I think you get somewhat of both sides. You kind of get the lowest lows with some of the people and this sense of purpose that I think you just don't get many other places, where you're really impacting lives on, it's life or death kind of where you're working.
It can be. And, there's times when I've had really close friends in here and I've gone in and visited them in the ER and had to sit down with them and their family and cry with them. And then other times when we have just, people have come up and said, "Oh, your hospital treated me so good." And I said, "Yeah, we've got the best people here." I mean, it's just been wonderful. I'm not sure this had happened in very many other hospitals because we are probably one of the smaller hospitals in the state. And of course, part of the reason that I was able to do this is because the board has known me. I've been a member of the community all my life. I was on our school board here for 25 years, and so I had learned a lot about governance and management through that experience as well.
So I kind of want to go back, and I know you kind of talked about your career path after college. What did you do as your very first job? Teenager, trying to figure out what you're going to do, how to make a little money. What did you end up doing?
It goes back even earlier than teenager. I was
All
maybe
right.
9 or 10 years old, and our neighbor lived about a mile away from us, was a veterinarian, and he hired me to help him work cattle. So as a rancher would buy a truckload of cattle at the sale, he'd stop off at the veterinarian's yard there and dump them in his corral, and then we'd brand them and dehorn them and castrate them and fix them up and give them their shots and all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of where I started. My job was to I had two jobs. My one of them was to make sure that there was always cattle in the way it worked, it had a big corral and then an alleyway up to the squeeze chute. You'd put the cow in the squeeze chute and then do the doctoring and stuff. Mine was to always have cows in that alley.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that, and then after I do that, if the cow was in there, I'd pour Warbeck's. It was a I know that they don't even use it anymore. It was pretty bad, but you pour it on the back of the cows so the grub worms wouldn't. The flies would come and lay their eggs on the backs of the cows, and then
Uh-huh.
grub worms would grow in the skin, and that Warbeck's would do that. That was my first job, and didn't last very long because I put the Werbex on one time before they branded,
Oh.
and it was highly flammable, and the cow
Oh
went up in
no.
flames. The sides of the squeeze chute were made of wood, and they started on fire. And veterinarian went and grabbed a hose and hosed it all down and got the fire put out and gave me a pretty good talking to, and
That's
that was kind of the end of that
oh
first job.
no. Yeah. That's a different kind of business, making steaks and whatnot. They were kind of jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah, well, and he tried to pay me in Rocky Mountain oysters instead of in cash too. Yeah,
That's
so
quite the.
my mom didn't like that idea either.
That's awesome. Okay, what about after that? After you kind of get away
So
from the
okay, so
cows,
after that,
veterinarian.
let's see, I had several other jobs. I moved pipe, of course. That's something that's pretty common here in Southeast Idaho. One of the harder jobs I had is in the fall after the beet harvest was done. My dad worked as a field man for the sugar company for a number of years before he started farming again. And we used to have to put black visqueen on the sides of the piles to keep the piles from freezing as deep. And
Mm-hmm.
then that usually started like in November after the beet harvest was done. And then all winter long, my brother and I had the job. They would pound 20-foot chunks of conduit down into the pile and then attach a thermometer to a string with a cork at the top of it down so that they could keep track of the temperatures in the pile. And they had those every 30 or 40 feet all the way across so there'd be three of them from this one side of the pile to the other, and then there was probably 120 sets of those all the way down the pile.
Okay.
And so all winter long, we'd go up on top of the pile, and our job was to pull those thermometers up, record the temperatures, put them all back down, and it took a couple hours every night, and we'd be up there in the blizzard or it was a freezing cold. That was motivation not to ever have that job again.
Exactly. Sometimes you learn what you don't like.
Yeah. let's see, I drove truck for a while, long haul truck. After I was married, worked on our farm for a while.
Did your family stick with the beets, or did you guys go to a different crop?
Our family has mostly just done sugar beets and wheat. We did cattle for a while when I was younger. Um, when I was in college, I worked retail for Cal Ranch stores.
Oh,
Not to
cool.
give them a plug or anything, but
Yeah.
I worked for Cal Ranch and sold ranch and farm supplies.
Hey,
I knew
awesome.
something about that.
Yeah, yeah, you had quite the experience and you know what's going on. So when you kind of got to the age and you decided you wanted to go to college, what made you decide to go into accounting? What kind of drew you to that?
That's a good question. I had a friend. I was going to go into engineering, and I had a friend. I got married, and the engineering school that I wanted to go to was a long ways away. And my wife said, "I am not going with you if you go there."
Well, that's an X right there. Yeah, I'm not going without the wife.
Yeah, and so I decided to transfer down to Idaho State from Rick's College. My wife and I met at Rick's. ISU had a great accounting program, and I was going into the business school anyway, and I got into my first accounting classes and I absolutely loved it. And so that's the direction I took. The friend that told me, "Oh, you ought to go into accounting," he ended up changing his major and went into finance, became a banker, and made lots of money.
That's awesome. Because I know my dad. He kind of was like in the same boat. He said I want to do accounting, and then that first day he got that big accounting book with all the laws, regulations with the tiny font, and he was like, nope. And that's what I was going to do too in college. I was like, yeah, accounting. That sounds good. And I think a lot of people have that kind of an idea because it's one of the more popular careers. I want to say, you get an accounting degree, you go become an accountant, and you're good to go. Everyone needs them, but a lot of people end up changing out, and so
Yeah,
it's cool to see that you stuck with it and ended up really enjoying it just from that first day.
yeah, yeah. And I really did enjoy all the classes in accounting, and it just came natural for me. It just felt good, felt right. I passed the CPA exam the first time I took it, which back in those days,
That's an achievement. Yeah.
I think 9% of the nation would pass it on their first try.
Wow.
So I was one of, that would, not to brag or anything, but
Yeah.
that.
It's a very humble brag. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and part of it was because of the training and the preparation that I got at Idaho State. I mean, it was a great school. I assume it still is. I haven't been that active with
Oh
the
yeah,
accounting
no, it's
program
it's a
since,
great
but
school. I think accounting is one of the good programs over there too. I want to just kind of ask you because when you're talking about your career path, you jumped into doing your own firm. What kind of led you to do that? I think some people are afraid to make that jump. What made you decide, hey, I want to do my own thing. I want to open my own firm.
well, I had worked for the local accounting firm in Pocatello for a number of years, and I talked to them about the possibility of ownership, becoming a partner with it and that sort of thing. And they said, "Yeah, we'll talk to you about it." And a year went by, and I asked them again, and they said, "Yeah, we really need to do something." And finally put it to them and said, "Look, guys, I don't want to be an employee all my life. I want to have some ownership." They came to me with a buy-in number that I thought was a little more than I wanted to do. And so I just said, "You know what? I'm just going to open my own firm." I rented space from a lawyer here in town. He had an extra office, and I just started up with a few clients that I had, and it built it into a pretty good practice. Ironically, 8 or 10 years later, when I decided I was going to go to work for the hospital, their firm had broke up, and one of their partners had opened up his own firm, and he's the one that bought my clients
About your
from me,
clients.
my book of business. So it kind of went full circle there, but yeah, I just always knew that I wanted to try to build something on my own and do something on my own.
Was that initial leap kind of scary to go from this sure thing as, hey, I'm an employee, I have a kind of a sure wage in a way, to now it's under me, like I'm in control of everything. Was that scary for you?
It was a little bit. It wasn't without a few nights of sleepless nights, and I thought that I could make it work, and I did. It was a leap of faith, and it was just me, and I hired my wife to be my receptionist slash bookkeeper slash whatever, and so the two of us worked together for 10, 12 years, or 8 or 10 years, whatever it was. I should look it up. Let's see, it was 94 to 2006, so
Yeah, about
be
12
12
years.
years. And at first it was challenging on our marriage because we've always looked at our marriage as being equal partners, and when it came to the accounting office, I had to step up and as the CPA and be the boss, and sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't. So
Trying to find that balance. I know in my current job, owners are all family, and there's definitely a different dynamic. You have to balance it out a little bit differently than it just at home. It doesn't quite always work out the same way. There's a little bit. You just have to be, open and communicate as best you can. And sometimes there's going to be strains, but I think being able to kind of separate the two, be like, this is where it works, so now it's at work, and then family, and I think that helps a lot. But yeah, I'm sure that would be somewhat of a strain.
yeah, it was difficult at first, but I can also tell you, towards the end of the time that we worked together, it was probably the sweetest thing we have ever done in our married life, because we'd go to work together, we'd work all day together, we'd go to lunch together, we'd come home at the end of the day together, and you know what? It has created a situation where she is my very best friend and my confidant and my advisor, and it I think it just brought us together closer as two people than had we not had that experience.
That's awesome. That's awesome to hear. So, just I want to jump into kind of where you are currently as the CEO of the Power County Hospital District. Is that right?
Howard County Hospital District here in American Falls. Yeah, it like I said, I kind of fell into the position. I'm learning how to do it still. One of the things that you said you were going to ask me about is mentoring and that sort of thing. And let me jump into that a little bit. One of the nice things that we have here in Southeast Idaho, and it's not that way in a lot of, well, in fact, I think it's unique to us,
Mm-hmm.
is we have a really strong hospital cooperative. It's a nonprofit organization that the CEOs have, back in I think 1999, organized. So all the hospitals, nearly all the hospitals in Southeast Idaho, and then a couple in Western Wyoming, have gotten together, and we meet once a month. CEOs meet once a month, and we talk about what's happening in our hospitals. And through that experience, I mean, I probably would have crashed and burned if it hadn't been for that experience, because I got to know some of the other hospitals. Rod Jacobson down in Bear Lake, he'd been there for 20, 30 years as the CEO of their hospital. And I talked to him and said, hey, can I come down and see how you run your board meeting and tour your hospital? And I've done that for nearly all the hospitals in the area and just learned from them. And that's been a lifesaver for me. And then I've been real involved with Idaho Hospital Association. In fact, I sat on their executive board and served a year as the president of the association. And that allowed me to not only associate with CEOs in Southeast Idaho, but all the ones clear across the state, and learn from them, and sit and listen to not only legislative issues but governance issues and strategic issues where hospitals are going and healthcare is going.
What do you think was one of the biggest things that you took away from either one of your meetings or one of the people that you met with at their hospital?
Ooh, good question. I think every time I've gone to a different hospital and the CEO show me around what he's doing, I've always come home with great ideas on how I can make our hospital better. One of the things that has helped us here, that I got from my peers, is that we could do remodel. We were in a hospital, American Falls Hospital, or Power County Hospital, was a hospital that was built in 1961. From 1961 until about 3 years ago, not much had been done to the infrastructure of the hospital or anything else. They've painted the walls and not much else. And from the time I started here, I always felt like that's one of the things that we needed to focus on is improving the way that our hospital looks, because we have had and have great medical providers, doctors and nurse practitioners, nurses. But if you come into a hospital that looks like it was built in 1961 and hasn't been maintained and didn't look very nice, the perception of the medicine you're getting is lower.
Yeah, it's diminished, I'm sure.
And so we were successful in passing a general obligation bond for our hospital, and we did a $15 million remodel to our hospital. And through that process, it's allowed our hospital to improve in some of the things that we were doing. We now have state of the art monitoring systems for our patients. We have all of the electrical, all of the plumbing, all of the medical gases, and everything else have been replaced. It looks new, it looks nice, and it looks like a hospital. It
Yeah,
looks
good.
like a new hospital. And I got that from touring some of the other hospitals because I saw that a lot of them were in a process. Hospitals are in a process of constant remodel, constant fix up. And finally, I just said, we've got to do this. My governing board was on board, and we went to the community, and the community supported us in it. And actually, we're still doing construction now. We've got another $1 million phase that we're doing right now in getting billing offices and administrative offices and HR offices built up.
Wow. I think it's awesome to learn from people around you. I recently read The Proximity Principle by Ken Coleman, and he kind of talks about how important it is to be around people that you want to be like. And so I'm sure as you're kind of thrown into the CEO position of you've done finance and accounting pretty much your whole life after college, and then to be like, hey, you're now the head honcho, you're the boss. And just to be able to go, hey, I need help from people around me and to really glean off them, I'm sure that's helped you immensely. And I think that's really, really powerful to know that you need to kind of get out there, socialize, get to know people, and then just build on each other.
Yeah, it's true. And one of the nice things is I can pick up the phone and call any one of 10 or 12 different CEOs from hospitals in the area or even in the state and just say, hey, look, this is what I'm facing. What are you doing to this issue? And then I don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
And we've developed enough rapport and friendship over the years in our group here that they call me and do the same thing. How are you doing with this, or what are you doing with Idaho Patient Care Act or whatever? And we just sit down and share ideas and learn from each other.
And I think that's a great thing that I think we need more of right now. I think there's a lot of a mindset of I can do it on my own, I can learn on my own, but there's so much knowledge out there from people who have already done things, who already have kind of experienced what we've experienced that we can learn from. And it might not be the perfect solution, but hey, it gets us a really good starting point in going forward.
Yeah, and a lot of the people that I have who are peers around me in the other hospitals around me have come up through the hospital system. They got their degree in healthcare administration, and then they went to work for a large hospital or a small hospital somewhere, and worked up until they became CF or CEO. And I didn't have that experience, and so they bring something to the table that I don't have. And of course, with my financial background and the background that I have through my school boards association work and sitting on my school board, local school board, it allows me to bring things to the table that they may not have as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of want to get into your day to day a little bit. And I know as a CEO, I'm sure you have a whole list of priorities of things that need to happen, things that need to get done. What do you do to help balance that out to make sure that everything is taken care of at the end of the day?
You know, I think that's one of the things that I love most about my job. I have the blessing of working in a small hospital, so I don't have a whole bunch of assistant administrators or people below me that I can say, "Hey, would you run this report?" Or would you. Some days I come to work and I'm a janitor, and some days I come to work and I'm a maintenance man. One time One day I was at work here, and my IT guy came over. My office is actually currently in a house across the street from the hospital. That's why we're finishing the administrative wing, so I can get an office in the hospital. But the city was tearing up the road in front between the hospital and my office. And my IT guy said, "Hey, let's talk to the city, see if we can run a conduit under while they have the road torn up, so that we can attach the your offices to the hospital with fiber." And so I called the city, and they said, "Oh yeah, if you'll have it done by 8 o'clock in the morning, then you can run conduit all you want." And so me and the IT guy and the two maintenance guys got our shovels and our picks, and we dug a trench.
That's awesome.
And that's just one example of how my job. I just never know what I'm going to face when I come to work, and I love that part of it.
It's a lot of thinking on your feet, making sure you're knowing what's the highest priority, and then helping anybody who needs help as well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have that experience if I was in a big hospital. If I was in a big hospital, the CEO of a big hospital is not going to be out trenching. It's not going to happen.
I think there's very few administrators in hospitals who are out trenching, so I think you're in a reserved rank.
Yeah, well, we got it done, and we are hooked by fiber optics over to the hospital.
Hey,
So,
awesome. That's awesome. I also want to ask you some questions about kind of the upcoming workforce. I know, like right now, registered nurses are in high demand everywhere. And that's a very enticing career for a lot of people, kind of as we've discussed. It's very purposeful. You're dealing with people's lives directly in a really personal way. So, what would you recommend to someone looking at kind of a medical industry or like becoming a registered nurse? What kind of traits do you look for in those kind of candidates?
boy, that's a good question. There is a huge shortage, and the long term outlook is pretty hard because a lot of the nursing workforce is aging and looking at retirement. COVID hit us really hard. A lot of the nurses, with the additional regulations and the additional risks involved with working in that, especially the ones that were close to retirement age or past it, maybe even, got out of the business, and so it's created a situation where we are struggling to fill nursing positions, and not only with RNs but LPNs and certified nursing assistants, CNAs, and other areas too. Rad techs are hard to find, and physical therapists and PTAs and speech therapists are really hard to find. Healthcare is going to be an occupation that is always going to need people, and it's always going to pay well. And so it's a good occupation to go into. It's not for the faint of heart, though. It's hard work, and it's doing things that some people just can't do. Like, I've got some members of my family that faint when they see blood or faint when they see needles.
That's me.
Yeah, and so for some people it's just not an option, but it is a good career. And I can tell you the nurses, some of the nurses that we have here working for us, especially some of them that have got years of experience, are making really good money.
Yeah. I listen to Dave Ramsey all the time, and they'll have their debt free screams. They'll have people calling in. And a lot of the people with those debt free screams, they're like, yeah, I was a nurse. And especially during the pandemic, they were like, I was working overtime. I was doing so much and working so hard, and they were making really, really good money to be able to provide for their families and well as take care of other people's families. I think it's an excellent career path. Why do you think people are kind of shying away from it? Is it the regulations and things that kind of came up from COVID?
Yeah, it might be some of the regulations. It's hard work. There is no question in my mind. I think one of the hardest jobs here is being a nurse, a CNA or a LPN or even an RN, and doing the cares for the people. And I think that some people would rather work a little less hard and make a little less money than to have to work that hard. That's one of the things. I guess your question was, what can we tell the new workforce coming out?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm pretty close to retirement age. I'm looking at giving probably 3 more years before I decide to retire.
Before you give 2 weeks notice to the CFO that they're going to be the new CEO. And
No, I've already told my board. I've given them a date.
oh, okay, perfect.
So, but some of the things that I have seen is that people coming out of high school and even college don't have the work ethic that I've seen even 5 or 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And that's really disconcerting to me. And I don't want to lump everyone together because we do have some really, really hardworking, really good people, but the numbers of people who have come to work for us and don't want to work. They just want to show up and collect a check and then go home and play video games or whatever. I mean, it's just huge. We've had some people in office type jobs. We had one person that worked for us for, I don't know, a couple of months and didn't even tell us they were quitting. They showed up to work 10 o'clock. Somebody says she wasn't at her desk, and they said, "Where's so and so?" And they said, "Well, she must be to the bathroom or on a break or something." And came back a half hour later. The supervisor did, and she says, "She's not back." And said, "No, I haven't seen her." And a half hour later, she came back again and still wasn't there. And so they called her on her cell phone, and she said, "Oh, I quit. My key and my name badge are on the desk there." Just didn't tell anybody, just left.
That
And
quiet quitting. Yeah, that was
and
a
the supervisor said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And she said, "Well, I live at home. I'm just going to play video games at home. My mom provides me with food and a place to live." And that's just one example. But like I said earlier, not everyone's like that. We do
right.
have some that come out and they are really good and really hardworking people and diligent and focused. And it used to be those were like 1 in 100 that were bad apples. And
Well, it's interesting that you kind of bring that up because there was a live stream that happened this last week with Dave Ramsey, Mike Rowe, and a couple of other special guests where they talk about this kind of labor crisis. And there's the stat is about 7.2 million men are deciding to not be in the workforce. Just choosing, they're not on disability, not anything else. They're just choosing to stay at home because of kind of like the reasons that you said that, they were told during COVID, hey, you're not essential, go home, work from home, or they're not rewarded for what they do, or they just kind of expect, hey, I'm here. I'm not going to really do anything, but I expect to get paid. I want to collect my paycheck and go home. And there really should be more of this movement of, hey, I want to work. I want to help people. I want to take pride in my job. And I think that's kind of a huge kind of hole that we have right now is you kind of get out of college and high school and you kind of expect the world. You feel like you're entitled to everything when that's not the case. It takes hard work, it takes grit. And something that I love is with a lot of the people that I've interviewed, when I ask them about, hey, what was your first job? They go, well, I was working on the farm from a young age. And then ever since then, I've just had this work ethic. I've had this drive to want to work, to want to help produce and do something that matters. And I think that's something that's really lacking right now.
yeah, I do too. I think that a lot of times, and see, a lot of the people that we get that have been less motivated to work, this has been their first job out of high school, and
Mm-hmm.
so they didn't even work during high school. I like I said, I started at like 8 or 9, 10 years old, and even before that, we had cows growing up, and I used to have to chase cows. So it's always been part of me and what I do to work. And some of these kids that we've had come to work here that haven't been as motivated as I'd like to see. Their first job, and they don't even know what work really is.
Yeah. So would you say motivation is kind of a key trait that you look for when looking at potential new hires or potential new team members?
Yeah, I think that that's something that we definitely look at. It's hard to quantify. It's hard to determine from interview questions,
Yeah.
but we do look for that.
I think it's easier now than ever to really stand out because like you kind of said, there are a couple more bad apples, and not necessarily that they're all bad, but just they may lack that self-discipline, that motivation, and they might have trouble finding that. And being able to be, hey, I'm going to show up, I'm going to do my very best. Even in your situation, I think, where you went from being an accounting CFO to a CEO, kind of a new role, new management, new tactics, and kind of whole new experience. Even though you didn't really have the training for that, you were able to pick it up, work it out, and kind of get it all figured out.
It was a steep learning curve, and a lot of times I felt like I was drowning from the fire hose I was drinking out of. But I had good help, and I had an understanding board of directors, and I did work hard. I wanted to succeed, and it was actually pretty good for me too, because I really felt like as an accountant, I felt like I was a good accountant, and I felt like I enjoyed working and doing that. But at some point, you look for more challenge, and so I was looking for a challenge, and I got one,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been good. It's been really good. I think we always need to challenge ourselves and look for opportunities for growth. And I mean, this has been huge growth for me.
Well, hey, Dallas, I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of talk with me. One last thing before I let you go. Is there any funny story that you can think of that you'd like to share? I know you had the cow one. I thought that was hilarious. I'm sure it wasn't at the time, but is there any other story that you can think to just share that you've kind of looked back and laughed
Funny
at?
story. Oh, they happen all the time, but I just can't think anything right off the top of my head. Things things happen all the time that are funny. I can tell you a story. It wasn't terribly funny.
Sure. Yeah.
But I did work at our local potato processing plant for a while, and I told your dad this, and he said, "Oh, tell him that. He'll like that story." I'd just come home off my mission, so I speak fluent Spanish even still. Accompanied a pretty good-looking girl up to the break room for lunch, and there was a table of Hispanic people that were all sitting together, and men, and one of the guys said something in Spanish that was very derogatory and pretty colorful about the girl that I walked in with. And I walked up to the table and I said, in Spanish, I said, you need to be really careful because some of us white folks speak Spanish. And he lost face with the group that he was sitting with. They all bust up laughing, and he didn't think it was funny.
Oh, I'm sure.
And the word was, I got back to work for the rest of my shift, and the word came back to me that he was going to look for me out in the parking lot afterwards.
Oh.
And do me some damage.
Yeah.
So I reported it to my supervisor, who reported it to the plant manager, and they escorted him off with police escort.
Oh, all right.
So I didn't have any problems, but could have.
Yeah, that was about to turn into something. All right. So there's the career path of Dallas Klinger, from accounting to CEO and just being a hard worker all along the way. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys were able to take something away from that you can apply in your own lives, in your own careers, and maybe that's something that you could look at for a potential career. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a 5-star review, make sure to follow me on social media, and let me know what careers you guys are interested next. I'd love to hear from you guys about who you want to hear from and what careers really interest you. So I hope you guys have a good one. I'll catch you later.